Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Meredith Glasgow. I'm a procurement specialist with the Connecticut Apex Accelerator, or CT Apex. Well, thank you for taking time to join today's webinar, Leveraging White Papers to Open Opportunities. This Apex Accelerator is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense, with matching funds provided by Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development, or DECD. Our host agency is the Southeastern Connecticut Enterprise Region, or sector. All attendees are muted and all questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. The session materials will be emailed out after this presentation completed. We are here to assist you in the government marketplace, providing assistance in all areas of government contracting, including registrations in systems like SAM.gov, or the System for Awards Management, providing research and government procurement opportunities, including providing a bid match service, helping you with certifying under socioeconomic categories, and assisting you with prime and subcontracting requirements. Connecticut Apex has office locations all throughout Connecticut, including in Hartford, Rocky Hill, New Haven, Milford, Bridgeport, and our headquarters is in Groton, Connecticut. Please feel free to visit our new website at ctapex.org and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also use the hashtag CTApex to tag us in a post. Our strategic partners include the Connecticut Veterans Association, America's SBDC, including the one in Connecticut, the U.S. Small Business Administration, including the Connecticut District Office, the City of Milford, CCAT, the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, and the Women's Business Development Council, or WBDC. Our agenda for today is to go over an introduction to white papers, understand the purpose of white papers, determine when you need to develop a white paper, identifying the different types of white papers, master the development, and connect with federal sales processes to convert leads from your white paper. We'll now switch over to the training video.
Thank you so much for joining us for Leveraging White Papers to Open Federal Opportunities. The Pulse of GovCon is a technological research and advisory firm that empowers government contractors through their BD360 solution. We do this through our educational platform. We have dedicated federal consulting, and we also have on-demand and customized training, of which we love to do through Govology. So thank you so much for having me back again. If you haven't met me, this is me. Please add me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. We post a lot of great information on the LinkedIn as well. As Darren mentioned, I am the co-founder of the Pulse of GovCon. We actually just celebrated our 7th year anniversary this week. So we've been around for 7 years, and I've been doing federal procurement for the last 13. Just a little bit about myself. I have my undergrad and my master's in writing, rhetoric, and technical communication from James Madison University in Virginia, and I am currently pursuing my PhD in writing and rhetoric from George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. This is not all too important, except for the fact that it might provide some flavor on some of the elements that we're going to be discussing today as it comes to writing. So if you ever need to email me, please do so, and please add me on LinkedIn. The purpose of today's training. What are we going to talk about today? White papers. We know that if you're in federal contracting, you're in GovCon, you're a small business, a micro business, or even a large business, everybody is vying for success and to get a piece of that federal pie. In 2011, CBS News reported that the government was spending $6.85 million per minute. That's an old stat, so you can only imagine what it is now. Over the last decade, the number of distinct federal contract actions has gone from 400,000 to over 1.4 million. And currently there are over 497,000 active federal contractors listed in SAM.gov. What I'm trying to showcase is just how big our industry is. And we know that federal contracting shops are consolidating and communication channels are increasing. And with all of those people comes a lot of competition. I want to start by setting the stage here because actually in one of the last presentations that I did through Govology, somebody wrote in the debrief that it sounded like micro businesses and small businesses were at a disadvantage in the market based on what I was saying. And in some ways, yes, that is the case. The barriers to entry are high, and it can be very difficult to learn how to operate within the context of selling to the federal government. And that's why you have great trainings at Govology like this one. So today's is going to be talking about the ins and outs of strategic marketing tools like white papers and how they play a vital role in federal sales success. Now, the objectives of today's training. We're going to overview the basics of a white paper and how it's defined. We're going to talk about the purpose of white papers in federal sales, determine when to develop a white paper, identify the different types of white papers and their applications, master the tactics of white paper development and distribution, and then connect white papers development to the federal sales process to convert leads to buyers. Let's start with basics and definitions. Understand the basics of a white paper and its definition in the federal industry. The term white paper is a funny one, and I always like to know the etymology of a term, where it came from. The term white paper actually originated with the British government with the Churchill White Paper of 1922. In the British government, a white paper was derived from the color of the document's cover, which indicated the distribution, with white being designated for public access. That's important. White paper is for public access. It is for the masses. And now white papers since then have been used in politics and business, technical fields, and really with the sole intention of educating readers to help people make decisions. So there's Winston Churchill there too, in case you didn't recognize him. Today, a white paper can be defined as a persuasive essay that uses facts and logic to promote a certain product, service, or viewpoint. We're really going to harp on this term persuasion. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up my sort of history and educational background and current education, I suppose, too, which is about writing and rhetoric. Rhetoric is, of course, the ancient art of persuasion through different means, whether that is written or oratory or visual. There's a bunch of different types of rhetoric that you can use. And a white paper is both written rhetoric and also visual rhetoric. And they can become in various types. There are common white papers that we're going to talk about today, but they're not limited to problem solution white papers, technical white papers, backgrounder white papers, list-based white papers, policy white papers, executive brief white papers, and visionary white papers. Now, each type really does vary in length, depth of content, and format. Other descriptions, according to the White Paper Guide, these are just kind of cute. A manifesto on how to solve a certain problem. A bait piece, the glue that holds a campaign together. An information widget, a way to freeze dry your ideas, and the magic Excalibur of marketing. Those might seem a little goofy, but when we're going to talk about what is incorporated in developing a white paper, you're going to see that it's more than just an essay that you would write. Now, it's become very popular to use white papers across so many different industries because they are very versatile as a genre of writing. Now, what all white papers have certain elements in common, the development of white papers in federal sales is particularly unique because if you hear me talk about government contracting at all, I always bring up the same example, which is that GovCon is an industry that took the English language. We take words that already have meaning, and then we shroud them in additional context. We give more meaning to what already has very basic English meaning. My prime example is the term past performance. Past and performance, you know what those words mean if you're not in government contracting. But when you get in government contracting, you know that there's way more that is interconnected to those two terms than you ever would have known outside the industry. The same goes for white papers. So in federal sales, A white paper is a persuasive document that educates your potential customers about a particular issue, problem, or challenge relevant to their industry or business. It's really aimed to position a company as a thought leader and an expert in solving a particular issue through its product or service. And it is unlike traditional marketing collateral. I'm going to say this now and we're going to reiterate it later. A white paper is not a proposal. A white paper is not an unsolicited proposal, and it's not your capability statement. That is different. If you wanted to learn more about those types of genres of writing within federal sales, that's not what this is today. We're going to talk about the differences in a few slides. Now, white papers dive deep into a problem, and they are very similar to an academic case study. There's an evidence-based presentation on the who, what, where, when, and how to showcase how your capabilities provide a solution to your federal buyer's problem, requirement, or initiative. Different key characteristics of a white paper used for federal sales include being solutions-oriented, evidence-based, educationally driven. They can have lead generation, and they typically do have a call to action. And it is a unique art. And you might be thinking, well, Lisa, I'm not a marketer. You keep saying marketing, you keep saying sales. I don't touch sales. And even if you're not a business owner, even if you're not in business development, even if you're not in marketing and communications, in federal contracting, you do sort of touch sales. You do touch marketing, even if it doesn't feel like it based on your job requirements. But no matter where you are in the ecosystem of federal contracting, your knowledge and expertise could be of great use for your organization's next white paper. So we have some specific use cases here just based on things that we at the Pulse have seen. So if you're in contracts or security, you might be able to help writers write more about a program, even if you can't necessarily disclose certain information due to security issues. If you're part of the bid and proposal team, you can absolutely help your company develop white papers, mainly because you already know about your company's service offerings and capabilities, and where to find additional hidden gems to really highlight what your company does. And even if you're a support service desk specialist, if you're on a contract somewhere and you understand the landscape and the evolution of thinking around domain-specific regulations, methodologies, certifications, and standards, you can further demonstrate your legitimacy. We are going to now be talking about white papers in federal sales to understand the purpose of white papers as it relates to selling to the federal government. When you are in GovCon and you write a white paper, there are a couple different objectives that you might have. The first and foremost one is you are writing a white paper to demonstrate your expertise. We know that federal buyers want to reduce risk as much as humanly possible. You see it when you're writing typical proposals too, right? You want the lowest risk solution. You want to see past performance because if you've done it somewhere else, then that is indicative of you being able to perform the work again. They are very risk adverse in the government. Another way to minimize that risk is to showcase that you are an expert in a specific domain. Educating decision makers. White papers are also fundamentally educational documents. We are trying to teach the reader something. We are trying to instill more knowledge into them. And if you are part of a federal sales team, or you're a small business owner, or you do BD or capture, then you'll recognize that a lot of your responsibility as a salesperson is also as an educator. We educate our customers on different methods of procurement and acquisition. We say, hey, customer, this is why you should make it an 8A set aside. Hey, this is why you need this solution and not that solution. Hey, we know that you have this tool set that was put in the RFI solicitation, but you know what's a more innovative tool set? This one. And we're constantly educating them to let them know what's going on in industry, what is on the up and up. Market research is something that the government is mandated by law to conduct to find out about the competitive landscape, but also to find out what's new. What do they need to invest in? Where can they become more efficient and effective for taxpayers? Building trust and credibility. Credibility is an interesting one. And again, I brought up rhetoric because that's who I am. But the foundational heuristics, the building blocks of rhetoric from ancient Greek, from Aristotle, was logos, pathos, and ethos. I know you said, Lisa, I'm not here to do this hoity-toity English lesson. Hear me out. If you haven't heard these terms before, you're going to start noticing that you use them anytime you write, and especially in sales. Logos appeals to an audience's logic, to information. Pathos appeals to their emotions. That's when you try to get that emotional draw out of them. And then ethos appeals to their ethics or credibility. When we try to build credibility, it means that somebody trusts in what we're doing. And somebody trusts you based on the fact that you put out educational material without looking for specific gain, like financial gain. They can trust you if you've established your credibility as an expert. And they'll feel that you're credible if you've done this before and you can write about it. Credibility is one of those things in federal contracting and sales too. That's why you see a lot more orals presentations, because the customer wants to get a sense of you as being a credible subject matter expert to be able to talk to the different components of a project versus just writing it down when it could have come from anybody's fingers that could have typed it. So building trust and credibility is another big part of why you might want to develop a white paper. Influencing policy and requirements. Now, this isn't probably for your typical small government contracting business, but there's a reason why large systems integrators have lobbying arms in federal contracting, that they have lobbyists, that they have government relations centers of influence who go and try to actually change and influence policy as it comes down from the legislative branch before it even hits government contracting. We want to make sure that Congress knows about certain issues that we have in government contracting, and they try to do it so that it benefits them. And there are others that try to benefit everyone or different subsects. So if you're like a women-owned small business in government contracting, there's an organization called the Madison Services Group, and they have the Women's Procurement Circle. And the Women's Procurement Circle have lobbyists to go try to encourage Congress to provide more set-aside efforts for women-owned small business. So white papers, that's something that these individuals will use a lot to provide it to those policy influencers to try to get things to change. Now, for the rest of us, I would say the most used and leveraged reason that a federal contractor might use and write a white paper is to generate leads. And you see this a lot on the commercial side too. Certainly commercially, this happens a ton. And we're going to talk about how this will generate leads in a little bit. But this white papers, they can start as a discussion point, potential collaborations. They get people in the door on your online presence. And then to raise awareness. If you're an expert in the field and you know that you have a unique view on challenges, you should be able to dive into that specific subject, really pull it apart, make it known so that other people can join you in the conversation. You have a new technology and you're like, this should be the status quo. Write about it, put it out there, because then other people might generate interest from that. Explain complexity. It can definitely be helpful in selling a complex product, something that you might not be able to easily put on a one-pager or a capabilities brief. This is something that buyers can get a more in-depth understanding of what you do and how it benefits them. Now, pivoting your strategy, something that you can do in government contracting when there's the risk of shutdowns or stale budgets is that you can pour your energy into developing white paper instead of proposals, and then utilize them to try to leverage micro purchases during challenging times. And then, of course, I'm talking about the saturation of this market and how many government contracting firms there are, and how the government, just like anybody else, needs to understand who you are. And so by having white papers, you can boost your search engine rankings, results, and click-throughs, which in turn helps buyers find you sooner. Government officials If they don't know who you are, what are they going to do first? They're going to Google you. They're going to look at what your online presence looks like. They're going to see that you are a legitimate company. They're going to check your website. They're going to see if you have these sort of thought pieces and what your virtual digital footprint actually looks like. Having white papers on your website is a great way for them to say, oh, wow, these people care about what they do in the market and they're putting out educational content about it. Now, you might be saying, Lisa, I've been doing government contracting forever and I'm a small business and I've never seen white papers before. I don't know what you're talking about, this, that. Well, it's because a lot of large businesses are the ones that are doing white papers. It's not to say that you as a small business can't and shouldn't, because you should. There's definite use cases for you as a small business. But if you look up different white paper examples, you will likely see them on the large business websites. So Gartner has one on human leadership, how HR can develop your organization's leaders. Interesting. Why would Gartner have such a research paper on there, a 12-month action plan for HR to foster human relationship at their organization? Could it be because they have government contracts that are around human resources and different personnel? Yeah, probably. McKinsey, same thing. Developer velocity, how software excellence fuels business performance. Palantir has an impact study called Palantir plus NIH, where they show what sort of work they have specifically done with the NIH. And then ICF client stories, opening a window on the history of FDA. FDA is one of ICF's clients. So they have ICF data scientists and engineers help make a centuries worth of agency. And then they go on to talk about the different accomplishments that they have done. So now this is what you'll typically see. And again, if you type in pretty much any large systems integrator and then white papers, you're going to see these pop up. So let's talk about the types of white papers in federal sales and how to determine when development is appropriate. Now, again, to white paper or not, do you want to put this together, or is this not necessarily something that's within your realm of consideration? If you do decide that you want to write a white paper, you need to consider your audience, the goals, the complexity of the topic before you start developing that white paper. So complexity of the topic, if the subject matter is multifaceted, involves technical details, and requires a thorough explanation. If you're doing something that's highly technical, you have to think about the time that's going to take. Your audience needs, you have to think about whether you're writing towards industry professionals, decision makers, policymakers, stakeholders, research findings, a comprehensive understanding of a certain topic, depending on what your audience actually requires. And then your educational or persuasive intent. If your goal is to educate on a complex issue, propose a solution, present research findings, or persuade stakeholders to take a specific action, you have to have that intent in mind before you start to write. Whether or not there's a depth of analysis required, if there's timeliness and relevance, if there's something that's happening in the industry that you have to get it out based on it being timely versus evergreen. Evergreen is the other sort of terminology that you may use where it's not something that's necessarily timely. It's evergreen like a tree, so you can use it pretty much anytime. And then the long-term impact and distribution. You want to present something that is going to remain relevant and accurate for extended periods of times. And now this is sort of a true and false type of quiz, because if you answer true to all points, then the white paper is probably the appropriate format to effectively showcase your thought leadership, influence stakeholders, contribute valuable insight to your industry, and achieve your strategic goals. But now what? So we've decided, yes, Lisa, all those things, even if it's not all those things, and you say, I don't care, I still want to write a white paper. Fine. Where do you start? Well, you start by analyzing the different variations of white paper formats that are commonly found in federal contracting. And we're going to go through each one of these today. The technical white papers, policy white papers, thought leadership white papers, best practices white papers, market research white papers, educational white papers, and product comparison white papers. But first, let's cover what a white paper is not, because I did promise to do this earlier. A white paper is not an unsolicited proposal. And if you've been conflating white papers with unsolicited proposals, you're not alone, but they are not the same thing. A lot of people, when I say conflating, I mean they use the terms interchangeably. Even in 2015, DoD's Office of Naval Research provided some guidance stating a white paper or research paper addresses technical or process problems, but generally does not address matters like salaries, benefits, travel costs, equipment purchases, certifications on equal employment opportunities. All of the other things that make an actual proposal a proposal. It's things like cost. It's things like being dictated by the FAR. It's including delivery schedules and cost estimates like an unsolicited proposal would. An unsolicited proposal is just that. It's something that a specific agency didn't ask for, but you send them a targeted proposal anyway, based on your understanding of the needs, with hopes that they'll sole source you an opportunity. That's sort of the underlying hope for anybody that submits an unsolicited proposal. It is different than a solicited proposal in which they would release a request for proposal or a request for quote. That is them soliciting. That's why it's called a solicitation. But a white paper is not an unsolicited proposal. It is not targeted to a specific agency that you would send to with the hopes that they will sign you on for a contract. A white paper is also not a blog post. A blog post is usually much shorter. It's probably 600 to 1,800 words. It doesn't take you as long. It might be relevant for just a few months. And there's a bunch of differences that you might see between white papers and blog posts. Now, not to say that you couldn't turn your white paper into a blog post. We'll talk about distribution methodologies in a bit. But white papers are authoritative documents that explore complex problems. Blog posts are shorter, more informal pieces to inform, entertain, or engage readers. White papers typically do target a specific audience that is seeking detailed information. Blogs cater to a broader audience, including general readers. And then publishing and distributions. White papers are often published as standalone documents on company websites, industry platforms, or distributed to targeted stakeholders. And blog posts are typically published on company blogs, social media platforms, or content sharing sites. A white paper is also not a capability statement. A capability statement, a one-pager, is a concise document, maybe front and back, that provides the federal contractor's key details, your UEI, your GSA schedule number, a high-level listing of your core competencies, qualifications, experiences. You have your differentiators, your past performance references. And so the difference between a white paper and a capability statement are that capability statements are brief and high level. They aim to provide a quick snapshot to generate interest, and they target decision makers looking for a quick overview. That's what a capability statement is. Now, again, as with the blog post, we'll talk later about how you can turn your white papers into capability statements, or you can pull information from your white papers to help you develop your capability statement. But it's sort of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Now, let's dive into those typical white paper formats. Technical white papers. Technical white papers provide detailed information about products, services, solutions. They have specifications, technical details, system architecture, and they meet specific requirements or standards as set by the government. Your content in a technical white paper might include your problem and context, your technical details, your planning process and solutions approach, implementation and project execution, compliance and standards, and the outcomes, results, and benefits. These are typically targeted at technical evaluators, engineers, project managers who need to understand the technical aspects and capabilities of a proposed solution. Technical white papers is, just as it sounds, technical. Policy white papers. As I mentioned before, there are people that use white papers to help in lobbying efforts. They discuss regulatory compliance, policy implications, legislative impacts. They might analyze how proposed solutions aligns with current policies and regulations and government mandates. In a policy white paper, you might have the problem in context, a summary of analysis and key findings, your recommendations, a call to actions, and you might have case studies or legal background if it's applicable, if there is case law. Now, policy white papers, the audience is government officials, policymakers, compliance officers who are responsible for ensuring adherence to regulations and policy. Thought leadership white papers. And there's another one coming up that government contractors most typically leverage because they are usually the most broad. So these thought leadership white papers position the author, which is usually a company, or an individual as an authority on a particular topic within the federal contracting space. These might be trends, innovative solutions, or strategic insights. These are the things that make your company different and special. Thought leadership, you see them on blog posts, certainly, but of course, in the format of a white paper, it's going to be more heavily researched. It's going to read more academically. It's going to provide proof points on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and inform individuals on. The content might be the purpose, relevance, and importance of that issue, your analysis and insights, your vision and strategy, case studies or examples, key insights, implications, and recommendations, and a call to action. Thought leadership white papers might be aimed at senior executives, policymakers, and stakeholders interested in gaining a deeper understanding of industry trends and thought-provoking perspectives. Now, similarly, there are best practices white paper, which isn't necessarily thought leadership because thought leadership implies that there's some sort of like innovation or strategy. But this is methodologies that have proven successful in similar government contracts or projects, lessons learned, case studies, actionable insights. You might have the overview of proposed best practice solution, product, or service, an example of successful implementations, your lessons learned, your recommendations and best practices, and a call to action. Best practice white papers might be aimed at project managers, procurement officers, government officials interested in optimizing processes, improving efficiencies, or achieving better outcomes in their projects. You might also have market research white papers, which is insight into market trends, industry benchmarks, competitive analysis, and market opportunities relevant to a specific government sector or agency. Your content might have market trends and opportunities, your market analysis and examination, insights, trends and priorities, opportunities and challenges, implications and recommendations, and a call to action. This might be for business development professionals, strategists, decision makers to understand market dynamics and identify potential opportunities for growth or expansion. Educational white papers. Now, all white papers are educational in nature, but by that, I guess a better term would be academic white papers. They're informative, authoritative, objective, providing valuable knowledge and actionable insight that empower stakeholders to make informed decisions. The content might be purpose, relevance, importance, background and context, key concepts and principles, case studies and examples, emerging trends and innovations, key insights, takeaways and recommendations, and a call to action. The audience for an educational or academic white paper might be government decision makers, procurement officers, contracting specialists, technical professionals, business developers, sales. You'll see all sorts of different people that would benefit from something that is educational or academic in nature. If you're in the DC metro area, you might know about George Mason University and how they have the Baroni School for Government Contracting. So they have researchers on staff that actually put together academic case studies and white papers about different trends in industry. And it's very, very focused on DoD and how spending occurs and different sort of financial implications for bidding against the defense sector. But you should definitely check it out. There's a lot of really great academic and educational content there. And then a product comparison white paper. You see this a lot in the commercial field. It can't be your product versus somebody else's product. It's typically two other people's products that you are comparing so that your buyer can look for the most suitable product and solution that aligns with their requirements and priorities. It's a compare and contrast. You have the purpose and background, criteria for comparison, product profiles, a comparison analysis, use cases, case studies, key findings and recommendations, a call to action. And this could be for procurement officers, technical evaluators, project managers, policymakers, decision makers, industry partners and contractors, and educators and researchers. Now, that is the last of the types of white papers. And as you probably noticed, there was some overlap between all of them. There were different use cases perhaps, but you're going to start seeing a lot of the same components within a white paper. This idea of here's the background, here's the nexus for why we're talking about this. This is the problem. Here's the solution. Here's the use case. Here's where it's happened before. And here are my recommendations for what you do with this information. It's not enough just to say, hey, this is the research that I've done. You should always have that call to action to say, and this is what you need to do with it. As an example, I actually have, and this isn't on the slide, but I wrote a paper for the Naval Postgraduate School for their acquisition research symposium that they have every year. And it was, once again, I'm going to say the word rhetoric, I apologize, but it was on how epideictic rhetoric influences source evaluation board members within the DoD through oral presentations. And I wrote it and I was like, here's all my research. Here's how this type of rhetoric actually influences decision makers. And my professors were like, okay, what do you want the government to do with this? And I went, oh, I have to provide recommendations. I have to provide that sort of call to action. Here's the information and here's what you do with it. And that's what you do with a white paper. So let's talk about white paper development and the tactics of white paper development and distribution, because development and distribution, you'll find, are almost equally as important. A white paper development, so format. Let's say you sit down and you want to actually start writing your white paper and you want to know what they look like. Well, there's not necessarily a standard format in how this is going to work. There's no fixed rules or industry standards. There's no evaluation criteria. There's nothing in the FAR that's not FAR regulated, because it's not going directly to your government customers in the same way and then leading to a contract in the same way. Everything from a 2-page flyer to a 100-page ebook has been called a white paper. So some conventions and key characteristics that you might use on the federal side is you want it to be at least 5 to 6 pages long. So about 2,500 words plus in portrait format. That sounds silly, but you'd want someone to be able to print it if they need. It should be objective in tone. It should be meticulously researched. It should feel academic when you put together a white paper, because otherwise it's just going to become a sales document. And we'll talk about that a little later. But it should be educational, practical, useful information. It's not just a sales pitch for your company. And it's facts and not just opinion. So now you can, when you format your white paper, you can make it a PDF. You can make it a web-based white paper. We have some pros and cons on here that you can read at your leisure. In 2017, the Army's research laboratory noted that a basic format for a white paper that one can follow would be abstract, description, funding costs, plans, customers. These are things that you could include. Now, content. What is incorporated in it? It does take time. It takes thought to create. Even though it's to educate, it doesn't have to be boring. They can be engaging, they're cohesive, they're thought-provoking. You should have an interesting storyline. You can have stats, facts, figures, visuals, illustrations. If you start Googling these, you'll see what they look like, and they are very visually appealing. I mentioned visual rhetoric before. This is not just black and white text that you would see on a white piece of paper. Similarly to a proposal, you need visuals that are going to break up the monotony as you read through it. It should have a call to action and a plan. And when done well, a white paper brings the reader along. And if persuasive enough, can end with the reader convinced that you're right. Now, when it comes to these sort of buyers from a B2B perspective, which is business to business, in 2018, they conducted a survey and they said that 71% of B2B buyers turned to a white paper to research their purchasing decision because they saw it as a credible source. It's sort of like in academia. When you are published, you're considered more of that credible academic and scholar. It's essentially becoming a scholar in federal contracting. And it can definitely be the front matter of your sales funnel. So if you want some more examples, I want to use this one in particular. So white paper, the promotion example is, this is the page that Leidos has. Leidos, if you're familiar, is a $11 billion systems integrator, government contracting behemoth. And they have a full segment on their website for their white papers about our products and solutions. You can filter down by market. You can filter down by their capabilities, and you can filter down by the people and the partners that they leverage on this. So for this one right here, we are going to open up the white paper, the Office of the National Coordinator Health IT Certification Program. If you open it up, you'll see this example of the content. You'll see that it starts with an executive summary, that the use of certified health information technology has increased exponentially since the inception of the Office of the National Coordinator Health IT Certification Program. This increased use of electronic health records is helping transform the healthcare system in the United States. They talk about the EHR products. They talk about the exchange of vital patient information. They talk about the partnership within the United States Department of Health and Human Services and what it is that the HHS needs. And then at the very end of the executive summary, it says, this paper provides an overview of these topics and details specific aspects of the product certification process. It also describes how the vendor, Leidos, is positioned to provide conformance assessments as an ONC authorized testing laboratory and an ONC authorized certification body. That's the crux there. We talk about white papers and it's like, okay, so why am I educating my customer? Why am I educating my partners? Why am I educating the masses? What is that? Because you can see here, it showcases the topics. They're going to talk all about this history. They're going to talk about it from 2010 to I think in the current time, it's 2021 when they wrote this. And they're positioning themselves to provide these assessments. They're saying, here's what's happened, and here's where Leidos has gone with this initiative. Here's how we've been a part of it. Here's how we've been changing it. Here's how we've been investing in it. And that's why we are the right partner to do this kind of work with you. I think this is a really important clause because you might just miss it until you look and say, okay, this is how the vendor is positioned. It's not a sales document. It's not saying, here's why you should leverage us. It's saying, this is why we are in the best possible position to help you meet these requirements. And that's persuasion. That's persuasion 101. It's focusing on your audience's needs. If you can address the problems that your readers want to solve, they will read your paper for a solution. It's important to emphasize your readers' interests rather than your own interests. It's the same thing as when you're doing direct federal sales, where you never go in front of a contracting officer and say, I'm this company and we do these great things and here's why we're the best and da-da-da. It's why you go and say, what problems do you have? What are your pain points right now? How can we help you? Versus here's what we do. Same thing in an executive summary. If I was ever to read a proposal and you spend the first 3 pages talking about how great your company is, I'm throwing it in the trash. It is not happening. You're not being customer focused, customer first. So here's a real prime example. This white paper discusses how to choose a freight service company that best fits your needs. Instead of, this white paper introduces ABC Company's new freight service. You see here in the don't do this, these are the things that we do and we do well. And here we are, me, versus the green, which is, hey, we recognize someone's got to make a choice in this. And here are the things that you should do and consider when you're making the decision that's going to be the best for you. Now, again, we are doing this with another purpose in mind. It's not just to educate, but it is to persuade. So it's to showcase that, yes, you probably are the right freight service company to fit their needs, but we're not necessarily saying it explicitly. Now, distribution. Once you put together a white paper, you need to get people to read it. And then you want to do something with this too, because it is technically marketing collateral. This is something that you put together from the marketing and communications perspective. So you need to figure out whether or not you are going to gate the content. You've seen this, and I'll show you an example on the next slide. Gated content versus ungated content. Gated content can lead to lead generation. It provides high value, and it's usually white papers, ebooks, templates, webinars, when you usually have a customer who's in the decision-making stage. Now, ungated content is stuff that you would put out for search engine optimization. You want people to find you online more. You want brand awareness. Maybe you have a mid value in what you're providing. These are typically your blog posts, your social media posts, your YouTube videos, and this is more for awareness and consideration. So the stuff that you put out that just anybody can see, that's to bring them in. Now, the gated content is so you have something that is specific. It's your domain knowledge and information, and now you've gated it so that you can generate a lead. So this is walling off content behind a form. It's meant to capture personal details. And it is one of the most common techniques for generating leads online. You see it, and you might see it, and you might say, you know what, not worth putting in my email address. Or you might see it and go, okay, an email address is a small price to pay for me to get this sort of information. It's sort of a toss-up, and it's something that you need to consider based on what kind of information is in your white paper. Typically, a company will create a landing page that has a description, a preview of what information readers can expect to find inside, and there will be a form to enter your personal information to gain access. After entering the required information, visitors are either presented with a download button or receive the gated content in their inbox. You are all probably very media savvy. You have all probably gone through this where either you have said, yes, gated content, I want it, or no, I don't. So here is a gating example. One of the white papers for Leidos, which was addressing the challenges of total airport management. It says right here, here's the page. Airport ecosystems are amongst the most complex in the world. In dealing with these complexities in the context of the whole airport process is a significant and multifaceted challenge. Read this white paper to find more on the role of data in this process, how operators can connect disparate data sources, the importance of deriving truly actionable intelligence, and keeping all stakeholders engaged in the process. Now, to actually get it, you have to put in your first name, your last name, company name, email, and country. You can opt in to email updates, and you can update your preference anytime. You know what it's like. You get on the mailing list. And if you are at an organization that collects a mailing list, either for your different specific leads from a contracting perspective, or maybe you're a service provider and you have just sort of like a mass mailing list, this is to update people. And a lot of folks are like, well, you know, I'm not selling something in the same traditional method of B2B or commercial type of sales. Selling to the government, why would I have a mailing list? Well, Leidos has a mailing list and they do something with it. They down select, they see if what different domains have registered under it. They can use it to put it into their repository to send different company updates, newsletters that they might have, different reports, press releases might come through to this mailing list too. And these are all things that small businesses can actually do fairly easily. There's so many systems right now to collect information and to blast message to different people. And it's all about keeping individuals informed. And it's just another way to bring in that sort of front of funnel lead. So now promotion, if you do have a white paper and it's online, you have to get eyes on it. Otherwise, you've written a paper for nothing but a happy pat on the back. So distribution is important. Are you going to have a landing page? Are you going to email your white paper to everyone? Are you going to promote it on social media? Are you going to have a webinar to build on the topics covered in that? Are you going to use your personal and professional contacts? Some content marketing thought leaders go so far to claim that you should spend 20% of your time on content creation and 80% on promotion. So we're all about working smarter, not harder at The Pulse. And so once you do develop a white paper, it can be distributed in these different formats. You can use the content to develop short form blog posts. You can use it to pull quote graphics or other social media posts. You can send these smaller versions of your content to your mailing list, linking through to the source content. So by that, I mean, when you have the legitimacy of a white paper, you say, look, I am an expert in DevSecOps, or I am an expert in this agile methodology, or this program management methodology, or I've seen great strides and accomplishments on programs based on doing X, Y, and Z. You got to let the people know. You have to establish yourself as being that expert. And you do that by showcasing the information that you've written, recognizing that not everybody, because it's not for mass consumption, that's not what a white paper is. Not everybody that gets sent the white paper is going to read the white paper unless it has to do with them, unless there's a problem that they have and you're presenting a solution. And so that's where the other little broad scope marketing comes into play. If you have that written information and you have a quote and you put it into Canva and it's a pull quote and you can post it on your company's LinkedIn and then connect it through to the white paper, read more. Or you can have, like I said, that short form blog post where it's more for everybody's eyes versus the technical expert. But you're using the information from the white paper because we are not about reinventing the wheel here. We know at small businesses, it's a lot to ask. And so you really want it to be worth your while if you're going to spend the time to develop something like a content white paper. So now we're going to talk about moving from that white paper development into federal sales and connecting it to the overall federal sales process. White papers and the sales funnel. So just as an example here, I do like this image. It shows what a sales funnel is. And if you've ever heard this before, we like to talk about federal sales and the front of funnel, so to speak. That's a marketing term, where the front of funnel is that top line where you have the most information coming through. And it funnels down, it gets smaller because obviously your action is going to be much smaller than your awareness. So in the awareness stage, this is when somebody is researching a problem and they come across a business's white paper maybe that addresses that problem. The white paper ends with a call to action for a free service, attending a webinar, trying a demo, and the customer trusts the white paper, so they sign up for this free service or this event. And then there's interest. They go, I've engaged with your free content, and they contact the business for more information. And then the action is when purchasing actually would happen. So now let's connect that to federal sales. Awareness side might be the government. There's somebody sitting on the procurement aisle and they say, I'm finding that I need to do a lot more with customer experience in our agency. Yeah, it's come from GIO recommendations. It's come from leadership. We really got to find organizations that are experts in customer experience. So maybe they Google customer experience. Maybe they look and they say, oh, hey, somebody wrote a white paper on customer experience and the use cases at different federal agencies. And they read the white paper. Maybe there's a free event that you have with it, and they attend to learn more about the subject. And I've seen this, right? I've seen government contractors that have established themselves as being a domain expert, and they say, hey, anybody come out, let's have an event. Like, it's a free event. It's not a happy hour. It's an educational event where we can learn more about the subject together. And then maybe they have interest after the event. The federal buyer starts internal conversations about how to implement customer experience into their current infrastructure based off your recommendations. And they even reference your literature as a source of knowledge. Hey, I saw this, and this white paper right here has this quote. It has this research. It has this backing. There's all of this information that's been written here about 800 times more effective to integrate customer experience or what have you. And they start using it as that sort of knowledge base. And then maybe the action is the buyer's contracting office releases market research to evaluate potential vendors. And maybe your company is on that invitation list. Maybe they said, hey, we know that you do this. We know that you perform this type of work. Here's an invitation to respond to an RFI or to sources sought. And this is sort of that introduction to your typical funnel. This is the introduction to the front matter before you get into the actual type of procurement. So this is all pre-RFP. I think that's one of the issues that I would really like to hammer home. This isn't that the government knows exactly what it needs. It's not that there has been content that has been put out in a solicitation. There's not been an RFI. There hasn't been market research at this juncture yet. You are truly trying to shape an opportunity. And if you aren't familiar, shaping is the art of using the pre-RFP period to make recommendations to your federal customers. These recommendations, we've talked a lot about recommendations today because that's what a white paper does. And this will help them put together a better solicitation while also increasing your chance of winning by moving the solicitation in a direction that benefits you. Now, from the general components of shaping, there's a lot of different ways that you might shape an opportunity. You can shape the statement of work. You can shape the performance work statement. You can help them define what tasks and objectives need to be accomplished, the performance schedules, what metrics need to be applied, how the requirements appear in a solicitation. You can help them shape proposal instructions and evaluation criteria on award processes, pricing structures, contract types, the number of past performance references, key personnel, resume requirements, and specific infrastructure like a facility clearance or certifications like CMMI, CMMC, or ISO. And you can even make recommendations on conflicts of interest, intellectual property rights, license agreements that will favor your solution and potentially even preclude others from bidding. So shaping, if you've ever really dove into what that means from a capture perspective, then you know it's more than just awareness and understanding drivers, data, trends, and forecasts. You need to be an active participation in the process to develop these solicitations by being aware of internal and external drivers. So an internal driver would be something that where the government already knows that there's something that they need to accomplish. So they have an RFI that is released. They have a sources sought. They have expressions of interest and GAO findings or protests or reports for deficiencies and improvements. External drivers might be the federal budgets, budget justifications, congressional appropriations, White House, OMB, OFPP memos, GAO recommendation reports, and agency or department and office performance documents. So you have to provide resources that document these external drivers, trends, and information to inform and educate buyers and to justify any acquisition strategy that you might have lined up. You need to educate and train your stakeholders on the correct acquisition strategy, whether that would be, hey, this should really be set as a socioeconomic set aside. This should be under this NAICS competition or this vehicle used. You can use the FAR, the DFARs, historical precedents, and other resources, and providing justification for why that acquisition strategy is relevant and critical to that particular office and opportunity. Now, how do you do this? How do you shape opportunities? There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. White papers are one of them. That's why I'm bringing this up, because a white paper being sent to and or read by the government can lead to decision making on how solicitations get released, on what these solicitations look like, on what tool sets are leveraged, on what structure they're released under. It can go so far as even previously, before any of that even matters, to impacting policy. And it makes it so that when there is a solicitation that's been released, the government knows who you are and you're already a credible source in their mind because you've used your white paper development to showcase your professional expertise in a specific domain area. And that's what the people are going to be thinking about when they do finally release a solicitation. So some final takeaways, and I know that I've thrown a lot at you in a short amount of time. And I'm really going to want to see some questions and hear some stories from you all too on how you guys leverage white papers. But white papers for GovCon truly are marketing collateral, first and foremost. And by marketing, I mean we are trying to show who we are to our audience, to our customers. And who we are and to who is super dependent on what your strategic needs are as an organization. It's just simply going to depend. And I know that's an unsatisfying answer, but answers are going to be different for a micro business than they are from to an $8 million business to a $1 billion business and everywhere in between. But marketing collateral is how we generate leads. It's how we have that sort of front of funnel, that search engine optimization, that something, that content that we are able to develop and put out for our audience to review and say, okay, I know who you are. And these are not puff pieces. Sometimes people see marketing and they go, oh, great, marketing, advertisements, puff pieces. And you see it. You see really disingenuous marketing from different customers or different clients that I've seen definitely in government contracting, where you can tell that they're just putting it together so they have something to put together. And that's not what a white paper is. A white paper is you have a point of view, you have a solution to a problem, and you're using that to market to better inform your customer base about the options that they have as a buyer and as a procurer. And then from there, that's how you shape opportunities. It can be the catalyst that can shape. This is a method by which you can shape solicitations before they even become an RFI, potentially. If you get in front of a customer and they say, hey, you're so credible, you know how to do this stuff, I haven't seen anybody else talking about this. And that's when it comes to sole sourcing, right? Like you need to understand the rule of two. And the government wants to increase competition, or they're mandated to increase competition by whatever means necessary. But if there's not another organization that is comparable to you, then that is when sole sourcing occurs. And if you're able to shape it, if you're able to use your white paper to say, nobody else is talking about this in the way that we are. Look, that's proof. Because you know what? It's so hard to have a sole source justification. Really, there's no other small business that can do this program management task for you. I sincerely doubt that. Because one of the things that I say to my clients is it's difficult to have a differentiator. You're putting together a proposal. It is difficult. It is absolutely hard to say what makes you different than your 400,000 closest friends in SAM.gov. A differentiator is your domain expertise and experience. It's writing it down. It's making it so that it's not just a trust me, it's research, it's factual. It is saying, here's where we've done it before and here's where you can see it. It's not just a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, trust me. And that is that credibility indicator. That's saying, I know what I'm doing and I can prove it to you here today.
That was a wonderful overview given about how white papers can open tailored opportunities for your needs, even when the federal buyer may not know that opportunity is possible. We'll now take some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. We have one question already. Can any contractor or service provider create and publicly release a white paper? The answer is yes. A white paper is a document that any contractor, product, or service provider can develop and publish publicly. It typically serves as an authoritative report or guide that informs readers about a complex issue or presents the issue organization's philosophy on a matter. White papers are commonly used B2B or business to business to promote a product, service, or methodology. But in federal sales, white papers can be used to demonstrate your expertise, propose solutions to the government agency's challenges, and establish credibility. We have another question. How do white papers differ from other marketing or technical documents? Good question. Unlike other documents like a brochure or a product sheet, which are primarily for promotional purposes, white papers are more in-depth and they have research-driven points. They aim to educate the reader rather than sell directly. White papers are providing a blend of detailed information and strategic insights, making them a valuable resource for decision makers looking for solutions to complex problems. Okay, what exactly is a white paper? How is it typically defined in the context of federal sales? The white paper, as I mentioned, is an authoritative document and it'll be informative, designed to educate its audience on a specific topic and present solutions to those problems or propose a certain type of methodology. In federal sales, it's often used to convey the value and applicability of a company's products or services to that federal agency, helping them understand how those offerings that you can provide can address their specific needs. Thank you so much. I know we went over time already as it is 12:07. So if your question did not get answered, then we will be reaching out to you directly. You can also email us at info@ctapex.org, which please note that is our new email address that we're using with the ctapex.org domain. Here's my contact information. And please visit our updated website to see our upcoming events on our events calendar. And you can access our training video library on that website as well to see past webinars, as well as this one will be uploaded shortly. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.